Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual evening to celebrate the publication of Grabbed, Poets and Writers on Sexual Assault, Empowerment, and Healing, published by our friends at Beacon Press. This gender-inclusive anthology of poetry and prose addresses the physical and psychological act of being grabbed or in any way assaulted. We are joined by 3 of the 4 editors this evening, and we'll hear from 5 of the distinguished contributors. I wish we could celebrate this event in person at the Gables Bookshop, but I'm thrilled that you've been able to join us here in our virtual bookshop. The chat function is going to be disabled for the reading portion of the event, but will be enabled again at the end for all to use. We'll have a little time for a Q&A following the presentation, so please, during the broadcast, write in your questions using the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. You'll also notice that you can order copies of Grabbed by pressing the green button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll ship out your copy right away. Every sale supports Books and Books, and we need your help now more than ever, so we thank you. Now let me introduce the editors. Please note that Nikki Mustaki could not be with us this evening, but is with us in spirit. So first, Elisa Albo. Elisa is the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, Passage to America and Each Day More. Her poems have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, most recently 2 Countries, Daughters and Sons of Immigrant Parents, and Vinegar and Char. An associate editor for the South Florida Poetry Journal, she teaches at Broward College and lives in Fort Lauderdale. Richard Blanco is a poet, public speaker, author, and civil engineer. Having read for Barack Obama's 2nd inauguration, he is the first immigrant, first Latino, first openly gay person, and the youngest person to be the U.S. inaugural poet. His books of poetry include City of 100 Fires, Directions to the Beach of the Dead, and How to Love a Country. His poems and essays have appeared in numerous publications and anthologies, including The New Yorker and The Nation. Caridad Moro is the award-winning author of Visionware and Tortillera, winner of the TRP Southern Poetry Breakthrough Prize, Florida. She's the recipient of an Elizabeth George Foundation grant and a Florida Individual Artist Fellowship in Poetry. Her poems and essays have been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net and have appeared in numerous publications and anthologies. The associate editor for the daily online literary journal Swim Every Day, she teaches at Miami-Dade College and Florida International University. And now, without further ado, I'd like to bring our guests to the screen. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
So, Kari, here we go. There you are.
Hi.
I'll see you in a little while.
Okay, bye, Christina. Hi, everyone. Thanks
Hello.
for being with us here tonight, virtually. So I thought, this is a story I never get tired of hearing. I wasn't in on the ground floor as editor when the first idea first emerged. So I'd love for Carrie and Elisa to take us all back to that aha moment when the anthology sort of came to life.
It's so fitting that we're celebrating it here and right before the book fair because it's a book fair story. The idea came to us sitting in the author's lounge right after the election in 2016, and we were pretty despondent. I was there, Elisa was there, many of our contributors were there. It was just this huge group of women sitting at this table, and we just could not reconcile the fact that we had just elected a grabber-in-chief by his own admission. And we just were despondent. And we walked over to see Rita Dove in the culminating poetry reading, hoping to find a little light, which Rita, of course, always provides. And I said, we should start an anthology and call it Grabbed. And Elisa immediately said, oh my God, I don't know a woman among us who hasn't been. Mm-hmm. And from that little aha moment, we started to work. And over the course of 4 years, we lovingly, painstakingly pieced this anthology together. And what resulted was just a book of incredible power, incredible catharsis. And I think it's more than we ever hoped it could be. Right, Elisa?
Yes. I mean, it always felt like something really important and something that was going to, really be relevant, and that we were going to, it just felt important. Like we had to do this. And it took a long time, but we got together periodically. Many times we started asking for work. We sometimes, a few weeks or months would go by, and it's like, we got to get back together, and we would get together again. And it started to come together with all of the pieces we were receiving, and they were just overwhelming. They were so powerful, so varied, so diverse. We said, and sometimes we would think, are we taking too long? But then something would happen in the culture, and we'd say, nope, still relevant. It's still relevant.
Yeah, we were worried that it would somehow become irrelevant. And wow, what hopeful thinking! Wow,
right.
Like it would suddenly disappear.
Like
and
we were saying.
The
other day, like, let's hope it's irrelevant.
Let's hope it's irrelevant.
Like
that's
next
the next
year.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, it's like it was.
But unfortunately, the relevancy kept rearing its head, and that actually those get-togethers that Elisa's mentioning. One of them we spoke to Richard about the anthology, and he, as always, was very gracious and willing to help us in any way. But that spurred on this conversation with him about the at first we envisioned a woman identified anthology, and then in our conversation we realized maybe we should include men, because Richard, what was your thinking when you heard about this?
Well, I mean, I think I shared, first of all, the immense excitement that, to be asked to come on board and whatnot, for the same reasons, going like, why doesn't this exist? I mean, I just assumed there was an anthology of this kind. But yeah, I just shared very honestly, I never understood my privilege as a male until I came out. And when I came out and I started going to gay bars and I started getting grabbed, and I was like, and I remember it was like after this clear, lucid moment, I was like, oh my God, this is what women probably feel like since they're little girls, like just that sense of just being objectified and whatnot, and having to stand up for myself. I'm like, no, it's not, you can't do that. No, like, I had never in my life had to be in that position. And I thought, then I started thinking about other moments in my life too, where, as males, you kind of pass it off, you kind of like, you're not going to say, you also have another layer of machismo to deal with. And if you're gay, then there's also another layer of but yeah, there were incidents, the relative and the this and that of just sort of, playing around, you know what I mean? And so and then all that started to realize, I think it opened a door for us to really think about, this is not only relevant, but also pervasive and universal, cross-cultural, cross race, cross everything. It happens in every single setting. They cross economics, every single setting. And I think the other thing that's really great about that, and we've talked about this already, was that if it would have been just women, there was always the excuse of critics to say, oh, it's like a women thing, like as has been done, to brush it off as like, as people can do, or as men can do, right? Well, that's just hysterics, or, she had the same response you get from in life, right? So,
a very Me Too response, anti-Me Too response, right? Exactly. And I think that those contributions really for me, were some of the most powerful, because it also revealed the vulnerability of men being assaulted in this way. And in many ways, they, as Richard mentioned, the layers of machismo or male pride or what have you, or a patriarchal system that has made denial of any sort of vulnerability the norm amongst men or male identified individuals. So it really gave this depth to it. And together we created also a volume that speaks to the possibility of healing that doesn't have to be on one gender or another. A conversation that was created. And these pieces talk to each other and with each other, and they're interwoven in ways that you'll find surprising, but in the end, just create this credible collection.
Yes, and that's why a lot of the pieces are from childhood, incidents that occurred in childhood, teenagers, adults, elderly. It doesn't matter the age. We have female identified, we have male identified, gay, straight. We have everything in here, and from every age. And they do speak to each other. They're just incredible voices that come out in every part of this anthology.
And mostly we just wanted to create a testament to voices that are vastly ignored, or even to allow writers, our contributors, to think on their lives and to delve into places where perhaps they had once been unwilling or unable to go. And my heart is just so full at what was offered to us, what we were entrusted with. These stories that reveal the greatest of vulnerabilities, and they entrusted us with those stories. So I think we all feel a great responsibility as the gatekeepers of those stories, and also to provide those who have not yet channeled their own narrative a safe space where they can perhaps think of what they want to say, what they need to feel for them, and that we're listening, however that manifests. We're listening and we're here.
Yeah, that's been happening at these events, which has been so powerful to watch the contributors and people just sort of. It's more than just a presentation. It's more than just a reading of anthology, and that's what I love about this project. It's an active thing in the world. It's not meant to just be on a shelf. It's not a pet project for us. It's not sort of like, oh, okay, let's do an anthology, and it's really something that we want to live in the world in very big ways and in very small ways. Like Carrie said, I love what Carrie always uses this word of a place for people to land. And so it's not, these stories were hard to write even for professional writers. I mean, it's as Elisa has told stories, like sometimes contributors like, oh, I don't have anything. And then they dig a little deeper. So for those of us, it's not really about, I think the book can also serve quietly to just tell the story to yourself first. But we also have resources online to accompany all this for teachers, for yourselves. If you want to do that through writing yourself, like these brave contributors have done, you can certainly take that route too. And like I always say with my students, just write as if nobody's ever going to read it, because you don't have to read it. But anyway, so I think we might have hear from our contributors now, and
yay, yes.
who are the meat on the bones here.
Absolutely.
Hi, so I'm going to invite Lynn Barrett to join us. And as she comes on the screen, I'm going to start the introduction and toggle you guys off, and we'll see you soon. Hi, Lynn.
Hiya, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
So Lynn Barrett, Lynn's recent fiction and nonfiction can be found in New Flash Fiction Review, River Teeth's Beautiful Things, Necessary Fiction, Mystery Tribune, and other journals and anthologies. Her story collection, Magpies, received the Florida Book Awards Gold Medal for Fiction. A recipient of the Edgar Award for Best Mystery Story, she teaches in the MFA program at Florida International University. And without further ado, here is.
Thank you. I will say that not that long ago, I was here as the editor of an anthology about getting around in South Florida before getting around became quite so limited. And I've done anthologies. So I think they're a wonderful thing in general. And when I was, and it was several years ago, certainly asked if I might have something, I immediately thought that I had done what Richard just described, which was that I had written into a file something that had happened and various ramifications of it and thoughts about it, just to write it. And I do think that's a good practice for writers, that you just write it when you're ready to write it, and then you can let it sit and percolate. And that is what happened with this piece. One of the things that is really striking to me about the book, I'll wave my book at you, is that the pieces are short. There's poetry, there's short prose, so that you're getting a lot of experiences in one book. And my own piece is 400 words. I think that was sort of the max that was set, but I found that it made me concentrate in a way that I appreciated. So this is called First Kiss. At 15, I was a popular babysitter, good with kids and bookish, not the type to sneak a boyfriend in. On this spring night, when the parents got home past 10, a little late, I was ready to go, children asleep, homework in my book bag. Mrs. M, not her real initial, rustled past me to get money from the bedroom. Mr. M, by the door, jingled keys. I'd walked here, but dads were expected to drive younger babysitters home after dark, despite everyone knowing everyone in our safe neighborhood. I could tell they'd been drinking. My father drank beer, sometimes shots of rye. My mother turned pink after one cocktail. Mr. M gave an impression of money and solidity, broad jaw, bulky shoulders. Dad called him a stuffed shirt. My mother admired Mrs. M's style. She'd often mention when they'd had coffee or volunteered together. I slipped the cash into my jeans at the front door as the front door clicked shut behind us. I was wearing a short-sleeved top, I remember, the night warm. Mr. M's car was parked on the street, aimed toward my house. He held the passenger door open for me. Cars still had wide sofa front seats then. I fastened my seatbelt. Through the open windows, I smelled lilacs. He walked around, got in, and started the car. I expected him to put on headlights, to shift, but he leaned over, braced one hand by my right shoulder, and kissed me wetly on the mouth. I stayed still, lips pressed closed, holding my breath till he pulled back, put on the headlights, and drove. I kept my mouth shut. What was wrong with him to do that right outside their house? Was he very drunk? Some fathers tried to chat, but none touched me. I felt sad for his children, his wife, but mostly I wondered how I'd tell my mother. She had such belief in other people's normalcy. She wouldn't want my dad to know. My dad would kill him. But wouldn't she feel she had to tell Mrs. M? And if not, still, she'd carry the knowledge. Either way, I would destroy the friendship. I thought of ways to avoid working there anymore. And soon I'd be 16, old enough to walk home alone. By the time I could see the lit lamp by our front steps, I'd accepted the burden of silence. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Lynn. Thank you. Now we're going to welcome Mia Leonan. And while she gets here, I will start telling you about her. Mia Leonan is the author of 4 poetry collections, most recently Fable of the Pack-Saddled Child, and a memoir, Havana and Other Missing Fathers. She's been awarded fellowships from the State of Florida Department of Cultural Affairs for her poetry and creative nonfiction, as well as other grants and awards. She has published in numerous journals, including New Letters, Prairie Schooner, and Notre Dame Review, and teaches creative writing at the University of Miami. Wow, you timed that really well. And here she is. Okay, hang on. I'm getting out of it.
Hi. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Thank you, Elisa, Richard, who I call Rick, and Caridad. So delighted to be part of this project. And I was actually in the room where it happened, at least the despondent part at the book fair author's lounge, when this idea was birthed. I'm really thrilled about the content. And I love that the book says poets and writers on sexual assault, empowerment, and healing, because it's all in here. So my poem is called Creation Story, and to give very quick context, it's basically an autobiography of my body from adolescence till now. And so it goes through without the reader knowing it, but when I wrote it, I was thinking of myself at all different times. And so it starts in my two cultures, starting in Missouri to Miami via Cuba. And so you'll hear all of that in here. And it's the life of a girl who is pear-shaped and a lot more than that. So here we go with Creation Story. At age 19, the Black community translated my white body for me. You can't be white. You who's got some extra loving on you, you ham hock booty. On Troost Avenue, men rubbernecked and crashed a 5-car pileup from looking at my ass. And me, head down, eyes glued to cracked sidewalk, face hot with shame, and me wearing a red A-line skirt that hit mid-calf. Years later, my husband explains, you can't cover that up. A year after, a lover explains, men know what's there, even if they can't see it. That's their second sight, their sixth sense. Black folks translated my white body for me, then Cubans did. Criollita original, negra vestido de blanco, gracias a la Virgen por este culo. From construction hangars, convertibles, and solares, they hissed and whined and moaned. I took a good long look at my face. My honey spattered face, my cowrie shell face, my calculus meets physics face, my Neptune trined with Saturn face, my split second gut instinct don't go with him face, my Venus in Cancer face, might want to burn every monger at the stake face, might want to nurse every baby ever racked with hunger face, my, yeah, I'm buying condoms, what the fuck are you staring at face, my, I want to have sex and I'm not interested in reproduction, so dispense with the dirty looks and write the prescription face, might want to put every warmonger on trial face, might want to strip down naked and stand in front of a military tank face, my ven pa' acá porque te quiero comer face, my abandonment issues for days face, my inner child face, before it was a pop psychology term face, my cowardly face, my fear of retribution face, my please don't take this little piece of mountain I've managed to molehill into a beautiful windowsill garden face, my I'm through with molehilling face, my turns out I am the mountain face. Oh, I took a long look at my face and I decided that it was good. So I tossed that mug, that kisser, that visage. I tossed her to the horizon for safekeeping. I fixed my gaze on her, and I started walking. This was the beginning of Resting Bitch Face. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to welcome Ruth Behar. And I'll tell you a little about Ruth. Ruth Behar is a distinguished professor of anthropology at the University of Michigan, a MacArthur Fellow, and the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship. Her books include An Island Called Home, Returning to Jewish Cuba, and Traveling Heavy, a memoir in between journeys. She's the author of Lucky Broken Girl, which won the 2018 Pura Belpré Author Award for Latina literature, and Everything I Kept, Todo Lo Que Guardé, a bilingual collection of poetry. Hi, Ruth.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Cristina. So glad to be here. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Books and Books. Thank you to the editors of Grab. Thank you, Richard and Elisa and Kari and Nikki. I'm so glad to be part of this book and part of this conversation. I'm going to jump right in and read you the story that I contributed to Grab. It's called The Man with the Violin Case. I was 19 years old, working at a gallery in Manhattan that sold primitive art. My job was to transcribe the business letters the owner spoke into a tape recorder. He was a decrepit and arrogant man, and he confessed to me that most of the art he was selling at inflated prices had been robbed from archaeological sites in Mexico and Peru. I wanted to report him, but didn't know how or to whom. In any case, the summer was about to end. I'd be returning to college and would never set foot in that gallery again. I finished the last transcription of the day and slid into the crowded subway to return to my parents' apartment in Forest Hills in the New York City borough of Queens. This was the working class part of Forest Hills near 108th Street, all nondescript apartments filled with immigrants. My younger brother was spending the summer in Boston where he was studying music. My parents were also away for the weekend. I had the apartment to myself, which was unusual, and I was looking forward to the privacy and solitude. My traditional and gregarious Cuban father didn't like to see me spending hours immersed in a book in total silence. He wanted me to go to parties, to enjoy life. He thought education was wasted on girls. I had gone to college against his will. After a long day of selling textiles for a boss he detested, he would slip into bed to watch reruns of the I Love Lucy show with the volume on so loud my ears hurt from the canned laughter accompanying Desi Arnaz's accented English. Silence frightened my father. He said to me, "You're turning my house into a funeral parlor." Every seat on the subway was occupied during rush hour. I leaned against one of the poles, trying to stay clear of the men who tried to brush up against me. It was 1975, and the subway was an easy place for guys to enjoy a cheap, erotic fantasy. I tried to read Being and Nothingness standing up, but it was awkward. The book was heavy and thick, and I kept losing my page. I looked up and noticed a man staring at me. He wore a dusty suit and a white shirt open at the neck and scuffed shoes. He was carrying a violin case. I guessed he was about 10 years older than me, but didn't want to look too closely. I turned away and tried to avoid his gaze, glancing at the signs posted in the subway and studying my red painted toenails. I could feel his eyes on me. Without looking up, I could feel him devouring me with his eyes. "You're overreacting," I told myself. He was a violinist, no more harmful than my brother, who played the bass. Maybe he was going to teach or perform somewhere. But why was he staring at me? I wasn't wearing anything flashy, a wraparound summer dress that tied at the waist and platform sandals. My hair was pulled back into a tight bun. My only piece of jewelry was a simple gold ring with a heart in the center. It was made from my great-grandmother's gold tooth when I was a child in Havana, and it still fit. I figured he wouldn't attack me in the subway. There were too many people. As long as he didn't get off at my stop, everything would be fine, I reasoned. He kept staring. I wished I could hide under a blanket. I suddenly understood how a woman might choose to conceal her face with a veil. I felt exposed, as if his gaze stripped me of my decency. I remembered finding my father's stash of Playboys when I was a girl and how it shocked me to see naked women posing so luridly and happily inviting the gaze. But I didn't know where to look. The staring man held the violin case against his hip at a strange angle, and it looked obscene. The more he stared, the more nervous I grew. I became dizzy and began hyperventilating. What would happen if I passed out? Would I be taken to a dark alley and cut into pieces? I'd read about dismembered women who'd been butchered and left to rot in garbage cans. I waited anxiously for the train to arrive at my stop. All I wanted was to be able to breathe normally again. People slowly left the train at one stop, then another, then another. As the crowd fell away, I felt even more vulnerable. From the corner of my eye, I saw that he stayed where he was, staring at me intently, his other features remaining still. If he took the slightest step toward me, I'd scream. The train came to a screeching halt. At last it was my stop. Jumping off the train, I smelled the stink of piss and dead rats, the nauseating aroma of the subway in summer. I rushed to the staircase and didn't look back for fear I'd turn to salt. I could feel him close behind me on the stairs. Would he pinch my ass? What was he really carrying in the violin case? A gun? A rope to strangle me? A whip to beat me? Knives to dismember me? The violin case was grazing my feet, and I quickened my pace not to trip on it. I reached the top of the stairs and turned onto the street that I always took to go home. He was following me. He walked briskly a few steps away. It had gotten dark. The thick green leaves of the trees made a swishing sound in the summer breeze. I glanced nostalgically at Jan's ice cream parlor, where my high school Spanish teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had treated me to a kitchen sink sundae as a reward for my studiousness. I had always been a good schoolgirl. Now that all seemed so long ago. I had a sinking feeling that my innocence would be snatched from me on that night, as the shadow of the man with the violin loomed ever closer at my heels. What could I say to make him go away? If I spoke, he might respond, and I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to look into his eyes. Was he a murderer? A rapist? Why was he following me? I crossed the street, and he crossed right behind me. I'd left the stores behind on Queens Boulevard, and there was nowhere to stop and disappear into a crowd. As I got closer to my building, it occurred to me I shouldn't go inside. Then he'd know where I lived. He could come after me. How comforting it would have been to know that Mommy was in the kitchen frying croquetas in oil, or Papi was in bed watching I Love Lucy reruns at full volume. But no, the apartment was empty, something I'd foolishly been looking forward to. The man with the violin case would follow me down the long, dark hallway leading to our apartment and grab me as I turned the key in the door. He'd put his hand over my mouth, push me inside the apartment, and Mommy and Papi would return home and find their dead daughter, their daughter who invited the angel of death by reading books every night in solitude instead of going out to parties and having fun as a young girl should. I took a turn past my building and kept on walking. He was right behind me. The violin case was so close. I thought he'd strike me with it at any moment. What impressed me was how he moved without making a sound, yet I felt him there. I walked several blocks past our building, crossed the street with him still following me. Then I took a deep breath and stopped at the revolving glass doors of a hospital near Queens Boulevard and pushed my way inside. In the lobby, there was a stench of illness and the bleach that was being used to cover up the rank odor of bodies decomposing in hidden corridors. I ran to the reception desk. "I'm being followed and I'm scared," I said. The woman, whose eyes looked yellow under the fluorescent lights, gazed at me strangely. "A man with a violin case. I think he's still there." I pointed toward the door. The man was gone. "What would you like me to do?" the woman asked. "Can somebody walk me home?" "We can't do that, dear. We're a hospital. Do you want to go to the emergency room?" It was tempting. I knew I'd be safe in the emergency room. Why don't you take a taxi? I can call one for you." I agreed. I had a few dollars in my purse. As the taxi drove me around the block to my building, I kept expecting to see the man with the violin case. I looked for him in the lobby, in the elevator, in the hallway, inside the apartment, in the closets, under the bed, behind the curtains. Over the next 2 days, I was so spooked. I couldn't sleep, couldn't shower, couldn't eat, couldn't read a single book. I was on high alert, watching day turn into night and night into day. I didn't leave the apartment, waiting anxiously for my parents to return. I kept looking through the peephole of our front door, convinced I'd see the man with the violin case standing there, looking at me. He disappeared like a ghost, but the palpable fear he awoke in me still haunts me to this day. Thank you.
Wow. That will be forever etched in my mind, the man with the violin case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
So now we are going to hear from Denise Duhamel, and I am inviting her on. I'll let you know a little about her. Denise Duhamel is the author of numerous books of poetry, including Scald and Blowout, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. She has co-authored 4 collaborative books with Maureen Seaton, the most recent of which is Caprice. She and Julie Marie Wade co-authored The Unrhymables, Collaborations in Prose, and she is a distinguished university professor in the MFA program at Florida International University. Hello, Denise.
Hi, Christina. Thank you to the editors of this amazing and oops, I'm supposed to hold it this way. Amazing and necessary anthology. Thank you, Christina, to hosting us, and thank you everyone here who's listening. The first poem I'm going to read is modeled after Jabberwocky, which is a nonsense poem, some of you may know, by Lewis Carroll. It's a 7-stanza poem, but I will read you just the first 2 stanzas so you can get the idea and it'll be in your ear. Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves, and the mome wrath outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. And I have no idea why, but this poem came to me when Trump was talking about the Access Hollywood tape, and he said, "It's just words, folks, it's just words." That's Donald Trump on October 9th, 2016. 'Twas nasty, and the slithy bimbos did gyre and whine in the pageant. All piggy were the gold diggers, and the moms who breastfed in public. Beware the pussy, my sons, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware those plastic surgery tits, and shun any frump who won't put out. Trump took his vorpal sword in hand, longtime Maxim subscriber he tugged. Then rested he in his tum-tum tower, and stood a while in thought. And as in lustful thought he stood, he saw Hillary with eyes of flame. Still Trump touched his wood and burbled as he came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through his vorpal blade went snicker-snack. We thought his presidential chances dead, yet Trump came galumping back. Only I have slain the Democrats. Come to my arms, underage girls. Oh, frab, just stay. How much do you weigh? We watched Trump's flag unfurl. This next poem is called Testimony. After he tried to kiss me during his office hours, I ducked and scrambled into the hall, wondering if I had imagined it. After he tried to kiss me, he dismissed all of my poems in workshop, though I wondered if I was imagining that too. Maybe I was indeed a mediocre writer. To get off the TA waiting list, you were supposed to give the chair a blowjob. I wish I were misremembering this. The two women who received the teaching positions thought I was uptight because I was brought up Catholic. I was drinking back then, I confess, but no amount of wine makes my testimony less true. It was the first time I lived somewhere warm, even in the fall. I wondered if I would have been safer in mittens and a coat. I wonder what those two TAs remember of that time, if they feel shame or rage or have somehow internalized it all. I never spoke up. I had no language to do so, not even in my poems, which became conceptual and abstract. Instead, I drove into the desert and posed as a cactus, kind of like that yoga pose, though I didn't know what yoga was all those years ago. I just wanted thorns, those chalice vines that leapt out when a predator came too close. And to close out the reading, Julie Marie Wade is going to join me here in a minute to read an excerpt from one of our collaborative pieces. Julie is the author of many books, both poetry and nonfiction, the most recent of which are Just an Ordinary Woman Breathing and the limited edition Hybrid Forms Chapbook Pride, which was winner of the inaugural Hunger Mountain Chapbook Prize. Julie is my colleague, an associate professor of English in the creative writing program at Florida International University. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Denise. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to the editors for including us in this book. It's a pleasure to read always with Denise. We're reading a couple of excerpts from a longer essay. These excerpts were included in Grabbed. And I always tell my students that every writer takes inspiration from other writers. Our inspiration for the essay Threshold came from a Naomi Shai of Nye poem called Problems with the Story. And the little quote, which is our epigraph, the story had too many beginnings. If you stepped through a door, 12 others might open. So the premise of our essay, we each wrote through 6 of the 12 doors, and we kind of gave each other the assignment to write the kinds of things we didn't always talk about, or maybe that we had never talked about with anyone until we wrote them, the doors that we thought might open to some of our most vulnerable rooms. So in Grabbed, there are our 3rd and 4th doors from the essay, and the 3rd door is mine. It was autumn in the Midwest. I won't get more specific than that. I was 30, give or take. I had lived with my partner for many years. In fact, I could hear her laughing, her sincere laugh, in the next room with this man's wife. Shall we? I said, rising. He rose also, nodded, then reached over and cupped my ass with his hand, gave it a firm squeeze, waited. A voice in my head said, call out to his wife, expose him. Another voice said, reminiscent of my mother, knee him in the groin. He was grinning by then. He was daring me to do something he knew I wouldn't do. But the worst part was, the voice in my head that was louder than all the others said, why would he grab my ass when his wife has a much better body?
A colleague from another department pinched my ass after I'd forgotten his name. He was an earnest kind of guy with no signs of outward machismo. I pretended it didn't happen. I pretended it was a bee sting. I pretended I was kidding around. Of course I know your name. My colleague's wife was a knitter. Though I'd never met her, he once made a big deal of the scarf she'd made him. I pretended I'd backed into one of her needles. I avoided him for a long time after, staying on a different side of the room if we had to be in the same one. I thought maybe he had a crush, but a year later he said, I owe you an apology for that goosing. It's just that I hate being invisible, and well, frankly, you remind me of my sister. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. There we are. Hi, Christina. So we are all going to come back on now and answer a few questions.
But first, can we just hear it for our amazing contributors?
Yes.
I'm
Oh my
sitting in here
God.
clapping and whooping it up. I thank you so much. You're amazing.
They were just incredible.
So good.
So powerful and moving. Wow.
And just encompassing everything, you know, none of the pieces in the book are repetitive, and that's what I love so much. Every story shines, and this is just but a little example of that. Thank you so much to our contributors.
I know, you just get blown away by each one in a completely different way. Lynn's was so wonderful, the way she read it, and Ruth, oh my gosh, and of course Mia.
Oh God. No,
That
and I
is
love hearing Denise read. It's just words, folks, out loud.
Wow.
Because we haven't heard our contributors read these pieces, which is so rare for poets. We're always hearing the word first, so to hear it come from them is just a very special experience for us. We're not only their editors, we are really their fans too. So we're quite honored and grateful to them, and thank you so much.
So it seems that everyone was riveted and has not asked any questions yet. I'll remind everyone that you can ask your questions at the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, or you can put them into the chat, but you should definitely ask them now. And while we gather some questions, I have one of my own. How did you choose who was going to be in the anthology, and how did that come about? How did that begin? What a process.
We really started when little kids give you their first round of a Santa letter, a Santa list, and it's like 5 reams of paper, and they start culling them down. We just started with this huge list and started soliciting work and reaching out to people, and then some of those people referred to some of their friends, and like that. It was this.
And how many are in it? How many?
92.
92 contributors total, yeah, including Anita Hill for the afterword and Joyce Maynard for the forward. But yeah, so we have, in between them, we have 90 contributors in there. So it was a lot to handle, but it was, mostly people we knew, or people, like Carrie said, who knew others, or, we would get an idea, like we would say, who we should really contact for this is Anita Hill. And then it would be, but how do we get to Anita Hill? And then, it was one of those things, well, Richard published somewhere where Anita Hill published, and maybe we can go through that. And, things like that. It was just wonderful.
And
I literally, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, we should say we solicited material, but one of the things we're discovering, and maybe we're just being a little too, we're too riled up right now, but it seems like there could be a grab too, because again, we've seen all these stories come forward, and I can't imagine, it seems like there's more, still even more to tell. So, but that was, I also want to, I don't know, Carrie and Lisa, we want to talk about the sections, which I find interesting, how not only the work, but how to sort of, not list them alphabetically, like would be the easy thing.
I think Elisa will agree, was the most difficult part. Was ordering the book. And I think the way it ended up shaking out is that we started to figure out, okay, how are we going to categorize them? So we ended up doing it by geographies, like, home and institutions. And then from there we decided, okay, well, but we have friends too, and that's a little separate
Strangers.
from home. So we went to strangers. So from there we'd literally just put them on the pile. Okay, this happened at school. This happened at home. This was with a friend. And you know,
Or family.
it's ironic that they ended up being almost equal in piles when we finished with them, because the places where they happen are so pervasive, and it just happens in the same places over and over again. So it shook out.
And we saw that through our contributors today, right? The locations and again across socioeconomics, institutions. So that was a real light bulb went off there, because we were for a moment we're like, oh the hell, we're gonna in a way that is meaningful, right?
Right.
I remember that.
We had poems and we had prose, and so it was a big mix, and it's all poems and nonfiction, so that it's all based on truth, which fiction is as well. But this is that was something that was in the end we wanted it to be like that. And two of the sections, strangers and imposters, may not seem geographic, but they are. It's the places where you are grabbed in some way, like in Ruth's story, for example, or even in Mia's poem. These are strangers, or the imposters, the people that you think are your friends, or a family friend, or a colleague, and they end up, not being that. They're an imposter in that way. So I think that it turned out well. I mean, it's funny because you're not sure if it's going to work, and then the more we look at it now, it's like, wow, it really does work in these areas. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So we have a question for the writers. So I'm trying to figure out how we can bring them back on one by one.
Okay.
And basically they're asking for the writers, as you drafted these pieces, what kinds of emotions came up? Were you ever wary of sharing such personal experiences? So I am going to see if I can bring them up and have them do maybe a lightning round of responses.
Or maybe a couple in the chat could tell us if they want to respond to.
Oh yeah. Let's see who wants to.
Who would like to take that?
So Lynn is coming. Okay, there we go.
There I am. I wasn't sure I was getting through. I want to say to something that was just said, that one of the things when reading the book I kept thinking about is how the word safe, which was in my piece but is in others, but also just how it turns out that public is not safe and private is not safe. That I'm a very spatial person. I really perceive a lot that way, and it was like, yes, this is the issue, that there is no place. If you went off to a convent, you wouldn't be safe either. There is no place. So you have to learn to navigate somehow. I thought Ruth's was so interesting. Her piece is so good, because it's like, how do I get around one block? It's that tension about how do you learn to survive, or to survive in one way or another, to survive the event. So that was the question.
Now that you're bringing that up, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention an amazing memoir that I read last year, was it? Rebecca Solnit. It's called Memories of My Non-Existence, and it's all about that. So anyway, recommending that to you. So let's see if Mia can come.
Christina, maybe you could bring Denise up, because she has something to say about that.
Okay, I'm going to bring her next.
Okay. Where's Mia?
She's there. Hi, Mia.
Hey.
Did you want to say anything, Mia, to that question?
Sure. The question, was it difficult to write? What feelings did it bring up?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was difficult to write in that it was writing about my own body, and that's part of the reason I think I started with adolescents in the very beginning on Troost Avenue. And I feel like it was like a part-time job all through adolescence to like hide my body because people reacted like to this very like pear shape. And I didn't, like many young women, we don't know what to do with the attention. And then and as Ruth's story so eloquently, displayed, it's very intimidating. And so I think it was liberating though to kind of like follow the arc of my life up until now, at least, and to have it when it took that kind of mysterious turn. I also wrote, I think as Denise put in the chat, I wrote in response, like some of it I wrote in response to going as far back to the Iraq War and moving forward to the Kavanaugh hearings and of course to the Grabbed. But the sort of riff that's in the middle about all the different kinds of faces, that was just sort of like also from hearing so many stories from my friends and from former students and other women about like when you do try to like own your sexuality, how then you also get like shut down and intimidated, etc. So it was really cool when the poem switched to like the face and kind of, that was one of those moments where the poem just took its own direction and I followed along, and I was happy about that. I feel like in the end there is empowerment there.
Exactly.
And it happens in writing about it and in this very moment of sharing it with everyone here right now. So
Thank you.
thank you.
So Denise is coming back in a minute.
I just wanted to, as long as we're on that question too, to point out that on the website for grabbedinthology.com, all sorts of prompts, resources, also educational guides, things like that for everything we're talking about because of the difficulty of getting through that. So for you to use as for yourself or as a teacher or as in any capacity, they're all there. And we're planning to add more and more kind of a crowdsourcing to have a place. The website will be a place not that where the conversation continues in a way. So
Absolutely.
keep that in mind.
Great.
Great.
It's
Okay.
meant to be interactive.
So Denise has not found her way back to us just yet. So maybe I'll call on Ruth and see if she has something to say to this question. Just takes a few minutes to get back.
Yeah, and Julie and Denise both wrote in the chat also addressing this.
Yeah, there was a neat, Julie was saying that collaboration helped a lot. I still noticed in the chat, and that's interesting in a way, like that's an anthology is kind of also a collaboration, like to come together gives us a little more bravery. But yeah, Ruth.
Hi. I got called in. Hi. Well, let me just say that I also want to say thank you to Nikki, and I'm sorry she's not with us tonight because she really gave me some extraordinary comments on my piece that really made it possible for me to write it. And I was very concerned that maybe I had actually wrote two pieces and she liked this one better. And the other one was more like exactly about being grabbed. And this one, I wasn't actually grabbed. And I said, are you sure this is going to fit in the volume? And she said, no, absolutely, it does. And said that it was about the fear. And so I'm really glad that she pushed me to write it and to think more about this incident that I hadn't thought about in all these years, but I was reading the story aloud because I was practicing it, and I read it aloud to my husband, and he said, "Oh yeah, no, I remember when you told me, when you told me that this had happened to you." I said, "Really?" And that was like right when we like first met. But But I think one of the things that now in reading it aloud to all of you that was so interesting for me was that the only place that felt like it would have been totally safe was the emergency room of the hospital. But there was really no real reason for me to go there. But if there was one place where I would have felt totally safe from the possibility of being grabbed, it was the emergency room.
Oh, and it was an emergency.
It was
For you, it was. Yeah. Yeah.
So in terms of feelings when I was writing it, I mean, it was intense. I mean, I did remember that sense of uncertainty, that desire to be an independent young woman at the age of 19. I had that summer job at that awful primitive art gallery. I wanted to like take the guy to jail, you know. It was like he was like stealing all this art and then selling it in his gallery, and I had to work there for him. And I was just feeling so angry. But well, it was just a summer job, and I'd be going back to college. But that desire to just be independent, I was going to be in, you know, in our apartment all by myself, and I was going to like do all these things. I was going to read, and I was going to write, and instead I just, you know, was completely petrified. And I just, you know, remembered all those feelings of helplessness and fear and not knowing where to go, like having this intense agoraphobia in the end, like there's no place where I can be safe out, you know, out in the public world, and just sort of going, you know, almost into the fetal position there and just waiting for my parents to return so that I could feel safe again. So remembering all of that.
You made us feel it.
It gets back to what Lynn was commenting on too, that there is no place, not even being alone in your own house is a safe space. So
and your piece, Ruth, also incorporated the idea that you don't have to be physically grabbed to be grabbed. That stayed with you, that terror, and it took something from you. You wanted to spend your weekend solita, having a good time, and he took that from you. So it just shows how pervasive this is. Oftentimes I feel like victims have to prove their victimization, like with a bruise, with a rape kit, and even those aren't enough sometimes. So it's much more than that. So thank you so much for your piece, because it really speaks to the long-lasting effects of being mentally grabbed. Yeah. Even if you did find safe harbor in the emergency room.
No, thank you for that, Kadi. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. It was really an honor to be able to write it and to be with all of you. In this.
We're honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Always.
I guess what I can add to the chat, Denise and I, when we decided to write this particular essay, we kind of knew it was going to be hard based on the epigraph that we had chosen and the kinds of doors we wanted to open. And something that really helped was that in the full-length essay, it's 12 doors, but each entry is only 100 words, exactly 100 words, not 99, not 101. We really held each other to a really strict form. And I often tell my students that I think a strict form, like the more challenging the content, the more a strict form can help you. You feel like I only have this brief space to say this thing, and I have to shape it within that space and sort of fling the door open, as it were. And so I think that the experience of writing that essay in particular with Denise, like only 1,200 words total, and the ground that we were trying to cover, it really helped to have that constraint.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful.
So we have another question here for the editors. What, if anything, surprised you as you were piecing together this anthology?
Just how compelling all the pieces were. Really, every single submission was just amazing in its own right, and everyone did have a story. And all of those stories, I will say too that I was very moved by some of the straight men who wrote for us. Specifically Virgil Suarez, who wrote this incredible poem with such vulnerability, and knowing, you know, he grew up as a Cuban male. You don't get much more machista than that. And in terms of the expectations, and here he revealed this incident that happened when he was a boy. So I found that vulnerability to be very moving and very compelling. And it actually it opened me up a little bit because, I admit that sometimes I just don't want to hear another male narrative, but he framed it in a different way, which surprised me. And ultimately, I think made me a better person and more willing to listen to those narratives that I might have otherwise shut down before the creation of this anthology.
Yeah, that piece brings out a lot of complexities and goes into a lot of other places, including the recognition of toxic masculinity and all that. So it's about his own encounter being grabbed, but also takes it to a whole male recognizing that male. It's complex. Yeah, that piece surprised me too. But Elisa, and you?
No, I was just thinking that your piece in it, Richard, how it kind of takes it from even another perspective. Your piece is incredible. The way you read it the other night, also, just that other side of being a kind of perpetrator as well. And it was just very moving, very powerful. And I agree. All the pieces are so diverse, and we have these common threads, but they're just incredibly diverse. The males and many of the, of course, the females. We have trans writers. We have just such a wonderful diversity, and they're just very powerful and very empowering. Cathartic. Somebody said earlier, they are that as well. So I urge you all to, to let us know. We would love to know at our website or any way you want to communicate with us, what you think about it. We've already actually started getting lots of responses from students, from people we know, people we don't know, from even around the country already, and it just came out. We're getting so many responses. I think people are really being touched by this.
So we can take one more question, and this is kind of intriguing, or I guess it just brings it to now. If any of those things happen to you today, what would you do?
Well, I can speak to
a good question.
Have you changed as a result of all of this? And what would you do?
with the Me Too movement, and with us doing this, I actually told the editors the other day, I suddenly felt empowered to actually deal with a situation that I had just kind of put up with for years. And I discovered I wasn't the only one that was being periodically harassed, even though this person actually physically would grab me by the neck from behind and whisper a compliment in my ear. And it was always just horrible. And this was, at a very unprofessional move in place. And I finally just felt completely like, I'm going to go report this, so you do feel like, I think you don't want to put up with things, but there are a lot of things that are subtle that happen, and it takes time. And for many of us, there are pieces here that just got written and they happened, decades ago, years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was just say Mia wrote something too that, she said, I'm grateful that today we have more language to talk about these experiences, like invasive staring. And so that's hopefully what the answer to the question, the way is we hope that this anthology makes that response easier. Right. But, and I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but like I always say about, I still have, coming out may be easier today, but it's still not easy. Right. And so we need these stories. We need these to continue, because I don't, even though we're in maybe a different space, it's still, it's still there. And like you're saying,
still happening.
We have, some contributors, amazing writers who have never written about this. And so, it's always there.
There's room for a grab too. Definitely. Having heard you, oh yes. So get on it.
And it's literally described it.
Wait a minute.
And we will get on the spelling of grabbed one.
I also
From grabbed.
I want to say
So-
just one more little thing, just because in response, I always feel like I'm so hyper aware of maleness. But like I learned something really important too about the surprise question from Frida McKee's piece, and Carrie broke it down, and Elisa broke it down for me. And I never realized that also there's layers of complexity in these stories that come out about, like misogyny amongst women, right? So this idea that the secret, the keeping of the secrets, and how that's also again no way out, no place safe to go, and that was from the outside looking in, you just think, oh, all women are together in this, and we stand, but another layer of complexity and story that again it's like there's no safe space. So I really, that was like, wow, like, yeah, I see that now. That was one of my moments where I was like, oh, okay, this is not just that, right?
I think a lot of times, so many more people have experienced this than many people are aware, and that they even themselves are aware. So that when you do finally, and I urge you all to read, for example, Yadira Peralta's piece in here, when you do finally confess or speak to someone about it, sometimes they'll say, wow, I was never aware, or they might say, no, that didn't happen, and so you question yourself again. Sometimes family members are certainly not ready to hear it, or people who you are close to, and a lot of times people, I'm sure not just women, but people think that it hasn't happened to them. And one thing that we discovered is, well, maybe you should dig a little deeper, because maybe it has, and we had several contributors. Well, we had several who just said, no, I have nothing for you. That's it. Then we had some that we just kept nudging because we wanted them in the anthology, and we're like, really? And eventually we got pieces. Yeah. We eventually got pieces from them.
Every person that we pressed a little bit came back with amazing pieces, because as you start thinking back on your life, and even us as editors, since putting this together, you kind of reframe your life and moments that happened that you were taught to look at a certain way, but then you realized, wait a minute, that was a grabbing moment. And so we hope that sort of awareness provides, a sense of fearlessness and a sense of just empowerment, right? That's exactly the word, to not. So what would I do if it happened today? Well, I'd like to think that 11-year-old girl that I wrote about in that pool would start screaming until the party came to a close and we got down to business. But of course, that's easy to say in hindsight. But I think that girl that I wrote about is at ease now because I spoke for her. And I think that might be the experience of many of our contributors. We have given the younger versions of ourselves, even if that's by a few months, a voice so they can be quiet now. And that's what we hope for all of our readers and our contributors. It's okay now. You found a voice and we hear you.
Well, you've done a brilliant job. And I just want to thank you for bringing this book into the world. So many people need to read it. I hope they will order it from Books and Books. Please, if you haven't gotten your copy yet, there it is. You can order it right below on the bottom of the screen. Wow, that is so cool. Okay. So I thank you for your time. I thank all the contributors for being with us tonight, for sharing their work. And we're incredibly proud to have been part of this launch for this wonderful book. And we hope to sell many, many copies at Books and Books.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
until we meet again and see each other in person, be well.
Good.
Besitos.
Besitos. Thank you so much.
Abrazos, everything. Okay.
Thank you
guys.
all.
Good
Thank
night,
you, everyone.
and everyone
Bye.
watching. Thank you.